finish is really on inclusion. And we do that in multiple ways, and it's almost an extension of who I am, really. We do that for corporates when they have really multicultural workforces, as Australia does, or when they have hybrid offshore teams really geographically dispersed. We look at, if you've got a business school, how do you make sure everyone is really included and engaged, and from that you lean into the productivity and efficiency of everyone working well together. But we do it from a very operational sense, and we do it from making sure that people understand their cultural differences and work to lean in on them. So we're really about cultural inclusion mainly, but just inclusion of all sorts of diversity is really what we're about. And we do that in a second way through a joint venture that we've launched it quite recently, called Culturally Diverse Women. So we're really focusing on the upward mobility of a woman from a diverse background in Australia, and the real lag factor compared to Anglo-Saxon women, there's less than 2% in ASX leadership. So we focus on that and what needs to be done, both organizationally and from women themselves, to progress and advance. So yeah, really all about inclusion. Admittedly, in primary school, I think I was quite a high achiever in primary school. High school kind of plateaued out a bit, and really then picked up toward the end of high school, I think. I actually, I lost my dad around 12, and that really sort of derailed me a little bit, and I wasn't really focused on how to learn. And the biggest thing that I realized towards the very end in my, what's here, I was born in South Africa, so that would be the end of year sort of exams. I realized, gosh, I'm not tackling how to learn. I can pretty much learn anything, but I didn't teach myself how to absorb material. And then suddenly I got it, and I kind of upped my scores. But gosh, if I had known that before, I would have done better. So not a great high school finish, but enough, to get me into university. And then in university, I just loved the environment. I loved being in charge of my own learning. I loved being able to extend myself and push myself. And then I realized, gosh, I'm actually quite good at learning and teaching myself things. And I really like the broad section of topics to be able to cover, and very real world kind of learning, and that really got me. And then I just excelled. So right through all my degrees, actually, I finished with a distinction or high distinction level, which, if you had probably spoken to my high school teachers, they'd be like, oh, she was pretty much an average, middle of the road, sometimes okay student. And wow, look at every single degree and master's, just finishing off with a distinction or high distinction. It's really, I taught myself how to learn things, which is really what it came down to. So yeah, and coming from two educators, so both my parents were educators, so I think they're quite proud of the end results towards tertiary education, not quite happy with sort of high school. From my university, I also got, being in South Africa, so this is now, we lived through apartheid times. So 1994 was the first democratic election in South Africa, and Indians were quite marginalized, not as much as black South Africans in terms of basic human rights. So we did have, through Mahatma Gandhi's sort of fight and struggle, the access to education, but it was still within a very sort of racially divided type of access to education. So we had an Indian primary school, an Indian high school, and then a proportion of us could apply for universities. So there's actually a number or demographic numbers on intakes from different sectors of the community. So we grew up with that marginalization and very race discrimination, very overt discrimination. So I was always really aware of inclusion and exclusion. Not so much early days, as a young teen, but definitely in university, very aware of it, and very aware that I could have actually done anything if I was in another country, but living in South Africa, I had access only to a select few courses and had to fight for a place at university. So that was my first experience of unfairness. So I felt quite taken aback that I'm not given equal access. Why is that? And is it only because of my color of my skin? And I really then grew up in that kind of feeling of fight inside myself. And then it was about, I think our parents were really good at creating opportunity out of challenge. So it was about, well, you've got this opportunity, you've got an, my mum always said, you've got access to university, now use it. And leverage everything you can. So it became that, I think, coupled with learning how to teach myself things and being a better student, came with, right, I've got an opportunity, I better maximize it. And that's where that kind of high achievement sort of came out of me in university. But I still carried all the way through university, and then my first entry into first job, that kind of fight for inclusion. So I remember when I finished, I did a Bachelor of Social Science and an honours in organizational psychology. And every one of my lecturers said, you're going to struggle, because then at that time it was then democratic elections, and it was very much about affirmative action positions, and it was all about affirmatively appointing Black South Africans who were really seriously marginalized in South Africa. So all of my university lecturers said, well, now you're not brown enough, you're not going to get there, so do something else, go overseas, do something else. We came from a very middle class family, and with my mom being a single mom without a dad, I needed to stay home in South Africa, so I needed to find something, and I really fought for the fact that I wanted to use my degree, I wanted to do something relevant. So I was very, compared to my peers finishing university, who all of them then went on to do another honours and a master's, they just stayed as students, whereas I really wanted to get into the workplace. And so I remember then was the first, 1990s, the first electronic typewriter that my mom got me. So computers were just coming into focus then, and those big ones where you had the flippy floppy disk, and you had the lovely paper that had the perforated edges, that was the kind of computer that we had. And I needed to get my resume done, so I got the electric typewriter and typed out my resume, which was really full of academics and student life really, and not much practical. But I printed out 60 of them, and I actually went out and posted stuff to ads, trying to really cleverly, because I had done a bit of recruitment and HR in my studies, so I knew how to craft a cover letter, and I tried to write it really in an appealing way, answering all the criteria, and got nothing. So nobody came back, and I was quite shocked by that. I was like, wow, it put in so much of effort, and you can imagine on an electric typewriter, you had to use the whiteout, and if you made a mistake, and it was quite an onerous task to type out 60 applications, and I got nothing, so I was quite despondent. But then I tried again, and I thought to actually ring places I thought I could work in. So here's no vacancy, but I thought I could work there. So I made a list of them, and that was then in the yellow pages. So I made a list of them, and I rang them beforehand, and I said, I'd like to talk to the person who was hiring. And so I had a little quick chat with them, and I was quite confident. And I said, okay, here's what I can do. Here's what I want to do. And can I get a start somewhere, anywhere in your division? I know I don't have any experience, but prepared to work anywhere, even associated to HR. Can I make a start? So I phoned, I think, about 30, 40 places, and some people were like, yeah, come in, drop in your resume, I'm gonna have a chat, and then nothing. And then one place actually said, yeah, actually, come in, and let's have a chat, a proper chat. And it just so happened that my late dad actually knew the CEO, and purely because of my surname did he recognize that I was his daughter. Now this is, my dad died at 12, and here I am 21. So that legacy of my dad came through, and I realized, gosh, it is all about networking. It's all about who you know and who knows you, that I got that foot in the door. And I became a then personnel officer in a training division, and I got my first start. So it was really by resilience and keep working different angles to get it. And people were shocked to go, gosh, you actually got a job related to HR in your first year. So I graduated the following April, but I started before I actually physically graduated. So that for me was a really learning experience and showed my natural grit. So I was quite resilient even then. When I look at myself now, I think, gosh, I still got a bit of that in me, going, well, how can I go under it, over it, around it? I never see it as that barrier or challenge. I always see my opportunity in it, which is what my parents gave us. See another way, and I think that's that start of being entrepreneurial as well. Which is, yeah. So I suppose that's university into first job, and then it's all about coming to Australia and following that story. But well, it was really not a very easy start, the transition between corporate life and being an entrepreneur. And the only reason I thought I needed to do something entrepreneurial was because inside the organization that I was working for, one, I was the only person of color in about 300 HR and training staff, and I didn't quite realize that until towards the end of my tenure. I realized, gosh, there's not much diversity in here, and also a lot of my ideas, because I've always been, when I tackled a role corporately, I was always even entrepreneurial in that role. I was looking for opportunities, looking for different ways, bringing in best practice, trying something, piloting it and taking it off, taking it to another level. I was never satisfied doing a job as per the job description. I'd do that and then I'd go, right, what's next? What else can I do? So because I was like that, there was almost like a resistance for the appetite for ideas. And even though in that company it was all about, on the face of it, it was all about innovation and let's lead it, let's do it, the actual internal appetite for ideas was quite low. And I realized that as I got to that saturation point of, gosh, there's so many things I could do with this, but I just can't do it. And because I wasn't at the very, very senior level, I was sort of mid to senior, it just wasn't that power or influence to be able to do it inside an organization. So even while I was at the company that at my last corporate role, there were many, many ideas that I tried even while I was at the company. So from 2009, we really launched our company MindTribes properly in 2013. But from 2009, I had tried multiple entrepreneurial ideas and learned from each one of them as I went. So I kind of had a good, wealth of lessons learned to be able to do all the right things with MindTribes that I had learned along the way. And sort of, a lot of the corporate world is fueled with that. We have a number of people who work a corporate job, but then have a number of things on the side, and that was definitely me. So in terms of, I always knew that, and there was a tipping point where I thought, okay, now it's time to actually launch and get out on my own. And it was really, I was on maternity leave for my third child, when I had a lot of time, early hours of the morning, feeding her and thinking, gosh, do I really want to return to work? Or do I want to try something different? And I was quite risk averse at this point, thinking maybe I'll just go back and I'll try something in another 6 to 12 months, let my child settle, and she's the last of 3, so I thought too much on. But it was really my husband who said, you know what, what's the worst that can happen? Go for it, and if it doesn't work out, go and freelance or do contracting, or don't worry about the income so much, go and have a go. So I did, and my first initial idea of transitioning from corporate life to entrepreneur was in the safety net of doing some freelance consulting work and figuring out, well, what is actually the product to market, what is the service to market that I'm actually trying to put out there. So I tried different things in a consultant model and also alliance partner model where other people would sell the work and I'd come and deliver it, to kind of find the appetite of what I wanted to do. And initially, one of my first proposals, I actually was rejected because I put together a consulting piece. It was on a consulting and training initiative on resilience for a group of leaders. And I was doing all the right things in the entrepreneurial podcasts and lists. I went with warm referrals. I went in with a few stories of where I've done it before, and I learned how to do a proposal and a pitch, and I did all that kind of mechanical stuff, and then received great feedback on the proposal, on the pricing, but then was asked if I could get someone else to deliver it, or if I could get someone internally at HR at the company to deliver it. And I thought, why? What is it? And they said, well, really, you're quite different from the 60 white Anglo-Saxon males in the senior leadership, and it's just that initial connection with you as the senior facilitator or the coach that they may not want to, and that's honestly just that initial part, but maybe down the track you can do some front face work for us, or working with individuals down the track. And I was really, really taken aback by that. And I was trying to be so professional in that engagement, and I said, oh look, let me think about it and I'll come away with some options of what we can do. And then when I got to my car, I realized, what has just happened? After all that very overt race discrimination in South Africa and growing up with that, here I am in Australia, sort of 11, 12 years having a corporate life and switching. Am I actually being rejected on who I am? And it was a little bit of a backhanded compliment in a way, and they were like, oh, look, also from an age thing, they probably just think you're too junior. And then I was my late 30s, and I thought, okay, this is an assumption that just because I look young, that I am, and I don't have the experience to offer. And I thought, gosh, here I am, gender, culture, age, and I can't fight any of it, because I can't actually win this deal, because they don't want me, they want somebody else. And so I actually came back the next morning on an email, and I actually hid behind the fact that they were rejecting me based on that. I said, it doesn't make good business sense for me to put in a facilitator who's very Australian, because from a cost model perspective it just wouldn't be right from a commercial sense for me, because I'd have to pay that facilitator, and commercially it just didn't make sense. And I said, look, let's reconnect later on when they had a different view. And I didn't quite tackle it overtly. I kind of slipped away under the radar, saying it was a commercial decision of not to put someone there, and I regretted it ever since. And then with that kind of experience, I thought, what am I actually offering to market? Where am I more authentic? Are people going to buy an organization development leadership consultant that I was trying to brand myself as, considering that there are so many Anglo-Saxon women around, more senior than me in the OD leadership space? Where was I actually going to cut through like that, or giving that offering, or did I have to be a bit more authentic to my identity, and who was going to buy from me? So instead of falling down again, it's my thinking of, let me come around it, underneath it, understand what it is that I'm trying to do, and who was actually going to buy was critical for me. So I thought, okay, it is about using my identity properly and being authentic, because I thought, instead of pretending to be very Australian and trying to chalk up all those 11, 12 years of Australian experience and really prove that that was enough to excel, I thought, okay, I actually have a great mixed identity, being South African, Indian, Australian, and there's a niche market in there who I'd be very valuable to, and who was that? So I went from a different approach, thinking, who would buy from me first? Who would be the potential customer? And then what would they buy? And then I pretty much crafted it from there, thinking from a customer angle, which is really probably what all the textbooks tell you in entrepreneurship, to think from the customer, and also then to commercialize what you're giving to the customer. And that's how we came up with what MindTribes offers. So really who I sell to, just today I was on the phone with senior Telstra executives who are looking to us to teach their Australian leadership how to engage with their Indian vendor partners and Filipino vendor partners. Now for me, that's really, really exactly what I wanted to do at that point, because they are very interested in the fact that I am not Anglo-Saxon. they're very interested to know that I actually have worked with India and the Philippines and Africa and Malaysia. That cross-cultural identity is valuable. So for me, I feel very authentic in being able to sell what we do because it comes from me. It's personally lived, and I can give something now that's quite unique. So we actually have no competitors in the market who can do what we do because it's very authentically driven from my co-founder, who's also my husband, and myself. So we lead this from a very personal place, and we can give something that no one else can. So it really was a very uneasy transition into really what our business is today. It is almost 5 years old now, but it wasn't so easy in the beginning. It was a lot of what the textbooks tell you about personal branding and finding your niche, and it's harder to do than it is to write down as one of the things you should do as an entrepreneur, and it takes some quiet reflection and really internal thinking and testing and retesting it to really find out whether that is right to offer. So yeah, it's been a journey. It hasn't been easy. I can't say that it's been easy, and it wasn't easy also admitting to myself that I needed to put myself more out there as who I was really, rather than trying to be everything that I was not. So yeah. How did I zero in on passion? Gosh, talking to someone like me, I think I've always got a fire burning about inequity and inclusion, exclusion, and I've got that fight in myself. So in terms of passion, I think I always had it. It's just that I learned how to use it correctly. It's probably the thing to channel it, because you can be passionate about a lot of things, but it's about whether you act on that passion and how you do it, which is really what I've learned to do more effectively over the years. And also sometimes being passionate and being very overt, you can rub people up the wrong way, and you can, push your audience away. It's very much so. So for example, launching our business very passionately about cultural connection and not having people in India or the Philippines or Africa feel like they are secondary of value in terms of working with a huge multinational or global partner, feeling like they're quite equal, being able to have a voice and taken seriously, not just service providers or cheap labor being outsourced. But for me, I was quite passionate about that, but I needed to know that the person that I was selling to may not actually have that view, yet they may not think there's anything wrong with transactionally dealing with a BPO or an outsourcing team in the way that they did. They probably thought, well, they are the service provider, that's what they do. So to really think cleverly about how to make this very much a business decision and leave it in control of the Australian business leader that I was selling to. So yes, I'm very passionate, but I had to package it up in a way that was appetizing for the customer, because at the end of the day, our business had to be profitable. I had to get people to buy, and people weren't going to buy just because I was all passionate on a soapbox about, oh, it's actually unequal and you're treating your people unethically and it's not very inclusive. If I said that, then we go, like, no, we're not, because they're not aware. They don't really understand that they behave that way. So I had to package it up from a performance perspective, and at a time launching a business where most learning and development, training, HR initiatives, budgets were being cut, most people said, well, you're going to have a tough time selling this. But we didn't, because we didn't sell to HR divisions and HR professionals. We sold to contact center heads, to CIOs, to CFOs, who actually wanted their offshore teams to perform very well because it made business sense. And it just so happened that the way that we were doing it was through cultural inclusion and cultural competence. They didn't care about that. They just cared that the team was underperforming and they needed to pick it up. And they read the rest of that, how it happened to us. So I had to think, okay, I'm passionate about it, but how do I bring it to market in a way that was really going to fly and to have repeat sales? So that was very important to me about, I'm passionate, but I have learned to be able to communicate in a way that gets people on board with that passion in the right way. So now that we have a brand and I have a brand around cultural diversity and inclusion, now I can really be passionate and say the things that I want to say, because we actually have a legacy of evidence of what we've done with clients, how we've done it, how we've brought people on the journey. But initially, if I just went with passion, I probably wouldn't have got those early sales. So now it's easier to be passionate and overt about it and be very confident about those messages, because I can. But still, I do it depending on who the audience is, right? So if, predominantly the people who hold power into inclusion of culturally diverse women are Anglo-Saxon women too, and are Anglo-Saxon men. So I've got to be careful not to be able to offend those people who think that, gosh, I'm really inclusive and I really want to do right by people all over from all diversities. So I really think and pick my messages correctly. So for me, it's definitely about, I don't lack passion, but I've learned to be able to deliver that passion in a way that's well received, and that I can influence enough to be able to push for change. And that is really what we are about. We've actually mobilized enough people around us to be able to push for the right kind of change by influencing and directing that passion in a way that's really nicely accepted. So I think it's a big learning curve for us. And if I had to think 20 years back, in my 20s, would I have been able to deliver that? No, I probably would have been just passionate, just raw passion, and I probably would have tuned out half the audience. But yeah, good learnings into how to deliver it. It's probably good for your audience as well to think about passion, yes, but execution and communication, how do you do it? I have a very different view on mentors. So I have never had one consistent mentor right throughout. I've actually learned through others' experience, most definitely. I'm a very, I suppose, reflective person. So most people think I'm just, extroverted and out there, but I'm actually quite reflective, and I need that quiet thinking time. So I've actually, in early days of entrepreneurship, actually listened to a lot of stories, and that's why I was so keen to do this with you, because I did a lot of learning there, listening to podcasts, understanding people's stories and journeys. That for me is almost like a form of mentoring, to be able to grab those learnings. Also very watchful of people who are quite successful and have taken idea to commercialization. And it didn't matter whether it was the same product or not, but I was just watching to see how different people pushed. But then definitely in my area, in terms of taking a knowledge and service and consulting model to market, I really did a lot of reading, reflection, watching, understanding people's stories to be able to understand what to do and what not to do. So that was very important to me to do. So really, in terms of mentorship, I've never had one steady mentor, but I've had advisors. So I've also complemented what I did not have in my skill set early days with people who did have those skill sets. So in a way, they were mentoring me on areas that I wasn't so skilled up on. And even our suppliers at the moment that help us with our business are a form of mentoring. So picking the right accountant and the right bookkeeper, picking the right design and visual design person who understands our vision but helps to guide us and mentor us in the areas that we don't see yet. So there's a lot of other pieces of business acumen that you need that you actually also don't learn in corporate, because you're not always seeing all of the angles, from administration to marketing to finance to even actually choosing the right IT platform. All of those things you just don't have that kind of view or lens on. So rather than try and teach ourselves, we've tried to pull in the right people who could mentor and guide us along the way. So I very much have been deliberate about who our suppliers are in our business, and they have formed mentors for us in those areas where we were not so great at in terms of skill sets. In terms of mentorship, in terms of a woman in business perspective, there's been, interestingly for me, a couple of women who I've learned from by default. So do what they didn't do. So don't copy them. Actually learn from their mistakes, which was for me very important to learn. But I'm a very vicarious person with mentorship. There's only one mentor that I have, and he's actually my co-founder. So he is my husband, but he's very different from me in terms of skill set, and also very creative in terms of strategy. So interesting that he actually has mentored myself and the business in terms of growth. He comes from a mergers acquisitions background, so he's looked always at the growth trajectories and push for business growth year on year. So whereas I have been so tunnel focused on taking an idea to execution and just focus on sales and client delivery, it is actually quite dangerous to just focus there and just from one sale to the next, not think about, right, what does 2 years look like, 5 years look like, what is the scalability of this business. And he's been able to be my mentor in that. So he's actually left his corporate consulting role about 18 months ago. So it was a very planned move. So across the 5 years, the early years, he's guided me from that perspective. And I think more than any other mentor or guide, he's helped me the most because also he knows who I am inside and out. I suppose sometimes with mentors, it's quite difficult for them to advise because they actually don't know where you're coming from all of the time. So it's very important, I think, from a mentorship perspective, to find someone that really you can trust and will have your back no matter what. Where I think, a marriage of 18 years is actually quite a strong foundation to say, look, he's not going to walk out the door tomorrow. He's going to take the good, the bad, and the ugly, and the not so confident moments, and the quite frustrated moments, and the fearful moments, and the vulnerable moments, all as part of the growth. And I think often when women choose mentors, they almost feel they need to behave in a certain way for a mentor to feel confident and have this sense of self-esteem and ego with another senior woman. And I feel that doesn't show your vulnerability, and you need to show that if you're really going to grow and develop in yourself. So I have deliberately not gone after another mentor in that kind of close relationship, because my co-founder and husband has provided that, and that's so far all I've needed. We actually have brought in some advisors to different elements of our business. So for example, we've just launched a global mobility product, so cross-culture, but from an expatriate perspective. So one of our clients was Santa Fe Ridgeways, and they're a global relocations company, and their ex-CEO is our advisor. So he would mentor us on that product to market because he's got 25 years in global mobility. He's the right person to fill our gap in the market. So we've gone after those sorts of knowledge type mentors and advisors, and then really learning vicariously from others. So really haven't gone after the traditional mentorship and guide from one particular person, really. Next steps for our business is growth, because we've been really quite happy with our revenue and what we've been able to do. We have a real now established brand in the market. So now I still get a little bit giggly, like really girl giggly when clients come to us, like big brands come to us because they know that what we do. And I go, gosh, if I turn back the clock on the first idea from that rejection sitting in the car to now, and I go, yes, people know us, it's good. And when people ask us to speak, and our brand is known, which is I'm quite thankful for, so that's great. And we've got some fantastic clients on book, and that's good. But that for me, I'm quite big sky thinking in terms of where we want to go. So now we're gearing up for growth and scalability. In the next year, we absolutely want to start working with developing countries in terms of referral partners. So we are typically we focus on the Australian and multinational client who has offshore workforces or moving expatriates, and it's been very Australian driven. And we've got to work with multiple countries as well through the Australian entity. However, now we have a very strong presence in the Philippines in terms of our clients' workforces, and we have quite a strong presence in India. So now we're looking at, well, let's embed someone in the Indian market and the Philippine market who can look for opportunities from a business development perspective. And we're also looking at Sydney, because a lot of our clients, key client stakeholders sit in Sydney, and Melbourne's quite a saturated small market. So we are now after appointing a business development manager in Sydney. So our next year is really replicating the growth. So whereas I have been the lead generator and my co-founder the lead generator, in that it's quite, it's time permitting, right? So from a sales to delivery perspective, it takes us about 6 months to land a deal and close it, and then to delivery. And there's only so many contacts that I can manage at one point. So now it's about replicating the effort in terms of pipelining strategies and lead generation and closing of deals, and doing it in multiple places, not just from a Melbourne-centric or Sydney-centric view, but tapping into those markets and being creative about how those leads come in. So that's what we're looking for in the next year. And we actually scale through licensing. So we have a number of trainers from our clients that we have coached on and trained to deliver our product. And interestingly, just organically, a number of our clients have moved on to other roles, which also brings other client contacts. But a few of them have actually are looking to freelance or looking to do other things. So now we have our clients who could potentially be delivery arms for us and freelance trainers and coaches. So that is our model in terms of, as those leads come in and they convert into sales, we do actually have now a small contractor workforce that can deploy for us also. So that's really fantastic. Also, our move in the next year is to focus more on technology. We have a cultural diagnostic that we've built is also on a cloud-based platform, so we can reach anyone anywhere in the world to culturally diagnose. It's a survey methodology, and then we unpack that data and tell our client how close or far they are from the countries they work with. So it's not theoretically based, it's actually their people based, so it's quite intuitive and predictive. We've got that technology piece, and we're building two other technology platforms. One is we have collect a lot of performance data. So for example, for our clients who are contact center based, we actually are driven by improving their customer satisfaction or their NPS scores. So as a Indian or Filipino agent is talking to an Australian customer, we reduce the cultural distance there, but we also measure how that impacts customer experience. And we can show month on month a significant improvement in there. Or one of our clients, we've actually just won 2 awards with them because we've turned their revenue over 300%. So that's from taking Fijian agents, selling to Australian customers and improving the sales engagement there, and cultural distance reducing to the point where they can now make an effective sale. And yeah, they've just driven it up by 300%. So we have tangible performance metrics that we measure and give to a business. And we're building a data platform to be able to capture that rich data. So for example, we would collect NPS scores month on month on month and watch the improvement as we coach and support staff to change their behaviors. Now that's fantastic. So we want to be able to capture that data, and it will tell a story, and potentially it can be monetized into reporting and giving more insight into different customer demographics and different agent or service delivery people in different countries. So very, very rich data that we're just pretty much sitting on that we need to build. So that's the first data platform we want to build. And the other one is actually to be able to reach more agents, so very much in a contact center space. We're building a learning management system, so being able to take our content. We've got 32 modules. Instead of actually taking productive time off agents off the phone to be able to train them in a classroom environment, we're pulling it all together into 32 modules that are self-paced and can be accessed as a learning resource for agents to cover self-paced. And then we'll just focus on the leadership levels in India and the Philippines who coach these agents to deliver a customer experience. So we're building that LMS platform, which should be really quite easy to transform, and we're already looking to partner with a provider in Holland, so that's quite interesting for us, and again will be a sales tool. Now we can say to anyone who has a barrier of going, oh, how are we going to logistically take our people off the phone to be able to train them, really fantastic module on culture, absolutely needed. Just can't get staff off the phone, like, right, here's the LMS, you get them through that, we'll give you 3 months to do that, and then we'll pull out your leadership to be able to coach those behaviors. So the LMS should be quick to market and open up more sales to the customer contact center world. So really next year is going to be all about lead generation, all about technology, which should then fuel more sales. So that's where it's heading.